All right. Okay. Well, thank you guys for joining us today. It looks like we have almost everyone here today. Lynette Edwards was teaching a class in person. She was super excited about. So she is not able to join us right now. And we will be joined shortly by Deborah Fisher, who is the executive director of the Tennessee Coalition for Open Government. She's actually teaching a journalism class at this moment. So she will not be able to join us at the very beginning. So I put her on the end of the agenda. I don't want people to think I was being disrespectful of Ms. Fisher by putting her at the end. She asked for that. But I'm super excited that she can join us today and talk a little bit about that group and what they do. I thought I'd start today by just giving a quick overview of what's been going on with the COVID-19 efforts across the system. And sort of see if there's things that you all feel like could be done better, that we need to do more of, any opportunities that maybe we're missing out on. We are joined today by Jorge Perez. This is his first time joining us today. Jorge is the Associate Vice President for Institutional Effectiveness. So his group has been doing a lot of work with the Coronavirus Dashboard. In fact, they created the Coronavirus Dashboard that's located on tennessee.edu/coronavirus. And that website is updated every day at 6 p.m. Eastern with numbers of cases for employees and for students, as well as isolations and quarantine. Anything you want to add to that about the database, Jorge?
No, except that I'm here and I don't want to take credit for the dashboard. A lot of work behind the scenes took place for that. Actually, Mike Gregory was instrumental in it, and a lot of members of the institutional effectiveness team as well. So thanks for that, Tiffany. But yes, you're right. That dashboard is updated daily with Tennessee Department of Health data largely. Some of it is data coming from a UTK website. The Nowcast prediction is coming from a UTK website, but most of that data is updated daily from the Tennessee Department of Health.
And then Mike Gregory updates the numbers of active cases daily at 6 p.m. from information he receives from the emergency managers. The communicators continue to meet bi-weekly to talk about challenges and things coming up. And the emergency managers are continuing to meet weekly to talk about some of the things and best practices going on their campuses. Just a quick little summary of what we've been doing since we spoke in April. Over the summer, we had a communicators meeting. We had 40 communicators from across the system, campuses and institutes, get together and talk about 9 different scenarios that could potentially happen around COVID and what we needed to do in terms of communicating that any of those actions out. And from those scenarios, it really helped us I guess, get off on the right foot for the fall semester. We actually used 2 of those scenario plans in one day before students even had started classes on one campus. So it came in very handy. And then as the fall classes have begun, the chancellors have started hosting weekly virtual town halls. So that way they can update their students, faculty, and staff on efforts, and then sending out regular communications updates. And I think that's about it that we've been doing so far, but are there things that you all feel like are missing in terms of our communication regarding COVID? Is there information that maybe we need to be tracking or keeping up with, or sending out that you all feel is a void at the moment? Well, yay, I might get off the field on that one.
Hey, Tiffany, I'm just curious, John. I don't mean to put you on the spot, but I'm curious if the coronavirus site has been beneficial to your media organizations and your reporters.
John North, not John Zomchik, because we're joined by John Zomchik.
Yes, John North.
Yeah, I think it's been great. I look at it every day. I'm sort of the designated person to look at it, and we have a running, which some of you may have seen, at least for UTK, not for the other members of the system. But we update the numbers every day. By the way, it's been very nice to see those numbers going down. I'm happy for everybody that that's what's been happening. I think the updates from Chancellor Plowman have been terrific. We're going, I think, now to 1 a week instead of 2, which is a good sign, and let's hope that stays. But yes, I think that it's been very helpful to have that kind of stuff. We have to, I'm just speaking honestly, we've been covering this virus constantly, as you know, since March, nonstop. And so we have to sort of evaluate coronavirus fatigue versus the need to keep the public informed. And it strikes me as right now, UT and the system are putting out the proper amount of information. I don't know of any gaps. I don't think that there have been any lingering questions as we talk amongst ourselves in our editorial meetings about, gee, why aren't they talking about this or that? So if that's any kind of a barometer, I would say right now from the media's perspective, UT and the system are doing a good job of being transparent. And I would say, as laborious as it maybe can be, just keep it up.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you, John.
Sorry, I'm trying to keep notes as we go, so I don't have to go back and watch the whole film. Okay. The next thing on our list was reviewing the site analytics. I'm going to send a report of the past year's analytics to you all later today, but just a quick snapshot. Since this site launched in December of 2019, this site's had more than 296,000 page views, which completely floored me. I assumed there was some interest. I did not expect it to be that much. I looked at the August report a few weeks ago and it said we had about 2,500 page views. And I thought that was a good month. I pulled the September report this week and we had almost 7,000 page views, actually 6,791, and 5,121 of those were unique. And as I look at sort of what people are going to, 90% of people are using that salary database. Apparently, people really want to know what other people are making. After that, the data dashboard, also held by the Institutional Effectiveness Group, was the second runner-up with page views at 474. And enrollment numbers, as a drill down on that dashboard, was a distant third with 72 views for the month of September. So I'll get you all the annual report. I'll shoot that out to you today. I accidentally deleted it and Nick is having to repull that for me. So I'll send it to you today. But I'm really ecstatic about the number of people who've been visiting the site. I was afraid that we'd have this big launch, people would forget about it, they wouldn't come back. Athletics has been fantastic on the Knoxville campus about sending us updated contracts. Shout out to Tom Sokoviak, who, as soon as they have a new contract, as soon as Jeremy Pruitt's was done, he emailed me and said, can you get this up ASAP? And then he just sends reporters over to the site, which probably helps our numbers. I'm sure, well, actually, it wasn't even a blip on the September list of viewing. So I'm not sure when that'll pop up because that was a September 24th announcement. But Nick Simpson on our team has done a really good job of going through all of the contracts, making sure they're all updated. That's usually where most people go, is the executive contracts on the site when they're not going to see salary database. So just huge thanks to Tom Sokoviak for making sure we stay up to date on that, and from the General Counsel's office for sending those signed contracts as soon as we get those done, completed as well. Just a reminder that people can request to put more information on the portal through the Tennessee.edu transparency website. Since our last meeting on April the 4th, we've only received one request. So maybe we need to do a little bit more social push to remind people that they can do that. That one request, I'm actually not going to put up on the site, and I've emailed the person. They wanted a link to University of Tennessee trainings. That's readily available on the front page of our HR website through Kate, and just didn't seem like something that the general public would really be more interested in. So I just emailed them with a link on where to find that, and talked with Nick Simpson, our website person, just to make sure that that's prominent on the HR website. So I think we've fixed that in a different way without bringing that over to the transparency website.
Hey, Tiffany.
Yeah.
Hey, it's Tavi. Hey, quick question for you. In terms of, so there are certain things on the website that will be updated consistently, right, as new contracts. And then there are other things that are more static. For those things that are more static, is there a timeline process to update general information?
Well,
As
jump on down to updates to the site. That's a great headway into that.
did I miss the agenda?
No. It's on down. But well, I mean, you wouldn't have known that I was going to give this update as I said that. So, so updates to the site, just as an FYI, since the April 4th meeting, was the COVID dashboard on August 21st. Information regarding the UT Systems non-binding letter of intent with Martin Methodist College on September 11th. And we'll continue, just as a heads up, we'll continue to add stuff there as that process goes on. We're in the process of doing due diligence. We'll have a special board meeting probably in November to look through that. And once that report's available for the board, we will post that to that website as well. And then contract for Jeremy Pruitt. As Tyvee just mentioned, there are things that are static on there. So the data dashboards are updated on an annual basis as we receive new data by institutional effectiveness. The salary dashboard is actually going to be updated the first week of November. We do an annual poll for the federal government from October, end of year October data. So as soon as they pull that report, they will also upload that to the salary dashboard. So that'll be updated in early November. But I think that's it in terms of the static information. Well, that's not really true. We also have annual reports for like the UT Research Foundation, the UT Foundation, things like that. Those will be added to the site once those reports are available. And all of those reports are being presented to the board October 23rd. So those will be updated as soon as those are approved by the board on the 23rd. Any more questions about the site? Okay, y'all are easy today. Then I'm going to turn it over to Melissa because she's going to test drive the FOI software for you.
Thank you so much. So since our last meeting in April, most of you will recall we've been talking about implementation of a new online system to house our open records requests. And so I am thrilled to announce that the UT system is now live. The system is called Just FOIA. For now, it is just a system, UT system function. UT Knoxville has been trained on the system, but they're going to likely go live when hopefully COVID will calm down a little bit. So I think they're stretched, but they're trained on the system, knowledgeable of the system. And so, Tiffany, do I have screen share capabilities here?
You should, but if you don't, I can.
Let's see here. Let's see if I can take you to how to utilize the system. Can you see my desktop, the website? Okay, I'll take you both on the front end of the system and a little bit of the back end of the system. I will say that since we went live with this in July, so over the summer, we just ripped the Band-Aid off and said, let's just start using this. And if we'll get the bugs out along the way. So here's how you can find it. And John North, you'll be particularly interested in this, I hope. I use you as my barometer, so please give me feedback. You'll pull down to the communications and marketing page to access the site. Tiffany, as I go through this, perhaps we may want to entertain having that link a little easier to find on our website.
That's a good idea.
You'll see right here in this area, we've got a button for public records requests. So you'll simply click on that button and you'll come to a page that looks like this. You'll click request public records. And again, I think it'd be great if we could have a 1-2 click max to find where folks need to go rather than 3 or 4. So to make a request from the UT system, and so that might look like something like, requesting emails from the president or documents from the board of trustees. Of course, those are mostly housed on our website anyway. You'll just click on this make a request button and it will take you to this page. One of the things that I really like about this system is it's very easy for the user. There's not a whole lot of information that we're requiring from a user, just the very basics, such as the name, the phone number, how we can get a hold of you. We've got some requesters that don't put a phone number, just an email address. We've got some requesters that don't put a physical address, but an email address, and that's fine. The system will allow you to do that. It's got drop-down menus here about how you would like to request the information, whether you want it online, whether you want to pick it up, whether you want it mailed, and then there's another category where you can list specifically how you would like the information. So that might look something like, I just want to inspect the records, and so there's an option there for that. Then in this area, you're going to enter the description of the record or records that you would like. And as you can see here, it's an asterisk. It's a required field. We have to have that information. But you'll also notice a lot of the fields up here are not required. We've got a couple of check boxes here. One to verify that you're a Tennessee citizen. The other to just acknowledge that the information that you are providing is accurate and correct to the best of your ability and knowledge. One of the things I like here is an attachment. And so on this particular page, what we would have people do is attach or upload a copy of their driver's license. And so you can do that as a simple JPEG file, so we can just verify Tennessee residencies. And so if we have you on file from a prior request, we wouldn't ask for that information again if we already know you're a Tennessee resident. And so that area, you can upload your driver's license. And then you just submit. And so it's literally, you know, a 2 to 3 minute investment at best to log on and request a record. So I'm going to move into the back end of the system. Any questions so far on this particular aspect of the system?
Melissa, can I jump in here real quick?
Yeah.
You touched on this. So I am somebody, being in Knoxville, I'm happy to go down. If I'm looking for a UTK record, I'm happy to go down and inspect it myself rather than sometimes request a copy of it. Did you say that's going to be spiffed up or modified a little bit so it's clear? Because if I'm wanting to just request access, that's speaking personally, that's something I probably would try to do with some frequency, and I wasn't clear if that's absolutely black and white here.
So you could, as it exists today, you could use the drop-down menu and request the other tab. But I think what I'm hearing you say is, would it be nice to have inspection as an option on that drop-down? Is that accurate?
You have excellent hearing.
Okay, I'm making a note to add that.
Because I think you're going to find some folks, you know, if you're in Chattanooga or Knoxville or whatever, you might say, well, I just want to go down and look at it. I don't need to have something forwarded to me.
That's fair. Thank you.
Hey Melissa, it's Tavi. Will this be accessible from the transparency website? Right now I see we have to go into communications and marketing and then do that drop down. Would it be helpful to be there? That in that case, if someone is looking for something that is readily available there and they see, well, I want to know salaries, and they see the salary link right there, they can click on that and not even, you know, take staff time or their time to go through this process. So it has a lot of things that they might already want to expect available.
Tavi, I think that's a great idea.
You know, Melissa, that's a good point, because when I was on the site earlier looking at just what we'd updated, you know, on the transparency page, we have information for how to submit an FOI request. And at the moment, it just has your contact info. So maybe we need to look at that and just sort of clean it up, make sure there's a link to this process, and maybe make it more prominent on that page as well. So that way requesters can easily find where to make a request without having to go scroll all the way through.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. Thank you, Tavi. That's an excellent idea. And that's easy. And actually it will save the requester, I would think, a good amount of time, and it would save us some time too. So
Melissa, this is Terry Denniston from Chattanooga, and I don't know whether this is for you or Tiffany, but so will people in Chattanooga use this? Will this have a link? Will our homepage or our communications and marketing have a link to this? How does that work for the other campuses?
So Terry, that's a great question. When we initially sort of put the idea out to the campuses about having sort of a one-stop shop for requesters, the idea was let's beta test this, if you will, with UT System first, and then the campus that has what we would consider the largest amount of FOIA requests, which would be UT Knoxville. So we'll beta test that for actually maybe about 12 months or so, and then begin to roll it out to campuses as an option for them to manage their open records requests. And so the way it would work is if someone is naturally inclined to go to the UT system to request a record, we would have a specialized button per campus where if they need a UTC record, there would be a button. If they need a UT Martin record, there'd be a separate button for that. We can also cross-reference that to the specific campus website as well.
This might be a good time to bring this up too. These conversations are in the early processes, but we have been inundated with public records requests. Poor Melissa is trying to do her day job and fulfill public records requests, mostly from attorneys who are using the process for free discovery. So I think she's got like 5 or 6 right now. One requester sent in 6 requests. 2 of the requests were 8,000 pages of printed documents. So we're trying to figure out how we can speed up the process so that other individuals don't get bogged down in it. So I put in a request for a position that could possibly handle FOIA requests for the entire system. So fingers crossed, maybe I'm hoping to get that this year. The president's very supportive of it. General counsel's office was incredibly supportive of it. I'm working with the CFO to try to find funding at the moment. So if that happens, we might be able to speed up that whole process and really centralize some things for requesters.
Thank you, Tiffany.
One, I'll pass around a hat for that position. Melissa's sanity would appreciate it as well.
Melissa's sanity would definitely appreciate it. Okay, let's if there are no other questions to this point, we'll take a look at what happens when the request comes in. When we have an individual who fills out this public request form and submits it, I immediately will get an email through my inbox from the Just FOIA software system to let me know that a new request has been placed. And I will add, and I neglected to say this before, one of the many reasons why I like this system is it provides a secure avenue for individuals, both the requester and me, to transfer information in a secure manner. So when you submit your driver's license, for example, that is now through a secure site within the Just FOIA system, which I think is really good and really needed.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, sir.
The public information, is it public information in regard to everybody that makes a request for information? Now, does that become public once it hits the form?
No, it does not. What the system will do is it will send you a reference number. So it'll look something like, well, I'll show you here. This is what I see when I go into the system. This is our dashboard. And when you click on requests, you will see that it's numbered UTS 14-2020. And so Representative Brooks, when you submit a request, you can either jot down that number because you could track your request and see where we are in fulfilling it, or you can just email me through the system to check your request. So this is what you get. You get a request number. If you were a reporter per se and wanted to see, oh, let's see how many requests the UT system received in the last 6 months, we can activate the system to do that. We have not necessarily done that because we don't ever get those requests, so we don't really think there's a need to do that. But you know, you will get a personalized code here for your request. Does that help answer your question?
In a way, but it seems to me, according to the statute, that once you create a public document, which we have done with the request for information, that then becomes, according to the statute, open to the public to see.
Mm.
So if the point I'm making, like that 8,000 page request, I think, you know, that needs to be public information. You know, there is a legitimate and a real vital important need to have access to public records. And I support that totally.
Yeah.
But the abuse of the system needs to be part of the public record as well.
Mm.
And I think if you check the law, I think the law says once you create that public document, and we create a public document when we fill out that request. Now, if you just say, I'm going to come down and look at it, you're not filling out a public document. But once I fill that form out, now I have a public document, and that public document, as I understand the law, should be and ought to be public information.
If I may jump in, Representative Brooks makes a great point. I think pre-COVID, we briefly touched on this during one of our meetings in the tower. Speaking as a journalist, he's right. It is who makes requests becomes part of the public record as well, whether it's lawyers asking for a bunch of documents because they are about to sue or are suing, or it's because a nosy journalist in Knoxville is curious about what Sports Illustrated is asking for. We tend not to do that, but a public record is a public record. There is no special veil, if you will, I think, to find out who's asking for public records.
So am I misconstruing the statute? Now, I mean, I can see a difference if I walked in and say, I want to look at something. I don't have a public record on that request. But if I go through the process of filling out a public form, now that form becomes a public document, and that information now is available to the public.
Following up on that, Representative Brooks, if I go down to UTK and make a request to look at something, I have to fill out a form, which is fine. I'm happy to do that. And that also should be public. Let me give you another example. When we go look at documents elsewhere, whether it's the city of Knoxville or just anywhere basically in the state of Tennessee, we typically have to fill out a form that attests that we are a Tennessee resident and what we want to look at. And that's public. That's in, for example, in the Knox County Sheriff's Office personnel files. Right. It's public. You'll find out I've looked at various deputies. So that also is public.
So if I may, and I would certainly defer to our attorneys for clarification, but I think if I'm understanding correctly, you know, the files have always been available, right? I mean, anyone who requests, if someone wants to say, you know, wants to ask, let me know everything you got in the year 2019, that is something that we would definitely provide under the statute. If I'm understanding correctly from Representative Brooks, is that, you know, maybe this system is an opportunity to have it already there so that someone does not have to ask for it. Am I understanding you correctly, sir?
In other words, if I walk in, I mean, if John as a reporter walks in and says, I need to see a copy of something and it's readily available, and it's not something that requires a huge amount of time on the staff to produce or for him to look at, I don't see a problem with that's not, you know, it doesn't reach the level of creating a public document. But sure. I think if you fill out a form, if you fill out a request, and it now is a public form, public request, it becomes a public document, and that now is available for the public to see.
So Representative Brooks, your timing is actually impeccable because we are joined by Deb Fisher. with the Tennessee Coalition for Open Government. And she can actually answer that question. She said just this year there was a statute passed that goes along with what you're saying. So I'm going to just turn it over to her to answer your question.
Hi, Chairman Brooks.
Good morning.
How are you? Yeah, no, that's always been the case. If someone has made a public records request, that actual request is a public record. And actually, it's important to us in the open government world that it remains so, because as you referenced, we want to know how the requests are going. We want to know not just, how the requests are being made, the volume of requests that are being made, but also, what's, how quickly or slowly or whatever that they're being replied to. And there was a statute that was passed in this most recent session. Chairman, Senator Gardenhire and carried it in the Senate, and Chairman Carter carried it in the House, that actually required a retention of those public records requests, those written public records requests, for at least 12 months, because there were some cases where they were being deleted. And one of the important reasons for that is so that we can track things just like you're talking about. And so anyway, I just thought I'd throw that in for a little background.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And so actually what we can do from here too, Chairman Brooks, is have a discussion with our General Counsel's office too on how we need to handle that going forward.
I mean, I think it's extremely important for the public to be able to access information, but to abuse the system for those whatever that number of thousands, that's ludicrous. We ought not to have to pay for that, because it is not cheap to provide public documents to the public.
No, you're right. 75% of Melissa's time in the middle of a global pandemic has been at my request right now, and that's
but the public needs to know that you've got this attorney out there that's abusing the system.
Thank you, Representative Brooks. I wholeheartedly agree. Tiffany, give me some guidance here. I want to be respectful of Ms. Fisher's time. I mean, I can go through, I don't think it will take me too much longer to go through the back end of this system.
Maybe 5 more minutes?
Yeah, I can do 5 minutes, and then we'll transition on. So from this system, the requester, we've talked about the submission of the request. I will receive an email in my inbox from the Just FOIA system to let me know that a new request has been received, and then I'll log in to the system on the back end, and I will see a dashboard. Talks about requests that need routing. It gives a timeline, which I really like, around open versus almost due versus past due. The only sort of fallacy in the system is that it gives me 7 days in total to fulfill a request. Now, Tennessee state law says, the requester needs a response within 7 days, but, as Tiffany alluded to before, when we have a request that is requiring assembly and redaction of 8,000 pieces of paper, that might take a little longer than 7 days. And so typically what we will do in that instance is just place a pause on the timeline. So let's go into requests. I did do a test request so that you could see what it looks like here this morning. And so when I click on that request number, this is the dashboard that I see. Let's see if I can move this over. On the right-hand side, you'll see the request details. And so you'll notice I didn't put an address in here, but I've got my name and my email. I've also clicked that I am a Tennessee resident, that the information is correct. And then I've got a file uploaded here that has a copy of my driver's license. Okay, so if you're using the system and processing the request, you can always see the request details on the right-hand side of your screen.
One point I want to make note of this too, when we did our annual security audit last year, one of the things, the only finding that we had against our office was that we were having to take digital images of people's personal information from licenses. So this actually also corrects our internal office procedures for our system security for IT.
That's a great point. It is, it's a secure system and definitely makes me feel a lot better getting that information in. From this point, you have a workflow process. As you can see here, here's the request number, and it's got a date of when those 7 days will expire. So you're constantly reminded of that 7-day deadline. Just to quickly go through the site, you have drop-down menus on your workflow. If something needs legal review, you would click this particular button. If it's pending delivery, all sorts of different options, which we can add things to if we need to. If we get into this and find that there's a drop down that we need to add in there, we can certainly do that. You also have, for lack of a better description, sort of a chat board, and I use this feature a lot, discussions. I'll add notes in here and say, you know, something to the effect of 7-day letter sent. And I can put a description in here. The 7-day letter was emailed to Tyndall on 10/6. And so I've got running notes here in the workflow system that keep me up to date on where I am in the process. It's just really great for record keeping. I can send emails to the requester here and give them updates on the process, and it sends through the system. I can upload their documents if it's a very simple request where they can get electronic records through email. I can upload these through the site as well. There's a section here called response documents that houses correspondence uploads that I send to the requester through the system, so that if I ever need to go back and look at the request history to pull a document, I can do that very easily. One thing I would hope we could transition to is the ability to accept fees online. Right now, we cannot do that right now, but we hope in the near future that we'll be able to get credit card payments or debit card payments through the system. You can also look at your activity and see how many, some of these are test messages. So just sort of the disclaimer there. You can see a history of all the requests that have come in. So Representative Brooks, this would probably address your point as well. If we could make that public facing, you can go through and actually look up the request. You can also run reports, as you see here, how many requests you process. One of the things I like here, if there are bottlenecks in your system, this will help identify where those bottlenecks are. For example, if it's taking an inordinate amount of time for, just as an example, finance to pull a particular record, it will help pinpoint where those bottlenecks are, and hopefully you can address those with future requests and figure out why it's taking so long to get them. And so in a nutshell, that is the Just FOIA system. We've been in it just 2 or 3 months already, and we're still working out a few kinks on our end, but I would say largely it's been really beneficial to keep track and streamline the workflow of what we do in our shop. And that is it, Tiffany.
Any questions for Melissa?
Yeah, Melissa, I have a couple of questions.
Hi, Annie.
Hey. So first, would there still be a pathway for someone, even if that person doesn't have access to the internet, to still put in records requests?
Absolutely. We will always accept requests that come in over the phone. If you write it on a napkin and hand it to me, we're obligated by law to treat that as an official open records request. So even if, and sometimes I do still get these, someone will email me directly with a records request. I will log it into the system just so I can track the workflow, but we will still continue to take them by phone or by direct email to an individual. That's a great question. Thank you.
Great. And also, for proof of residency, does it have to be a state driver's license, or are there other ways to prove that the person is a citizen of Tennessee?
Right. There are other ways. Just the most common way that we would get it in is a valid Tennessee driver's license. So we could utilize a utility bill or a passport or any number of different things. But Tennessee driver's license just appears to be the most common way that we would get it in.
Mm-hmm. Maybe if, so on the form, I just noticed that it said proof of residency, and it didn't seem like there was a place where someone could see different forms of ID that could work for that. Perhaps there's a way that we could put in a link to say, do you have questions about what this requirement is? And then perhaps include that information in it.
Okay. That should be very easy to do.
Thanks, Melissa.
Sure. Any other questions?
Okay. Thank you, Melissa. I appreciate that. And we are joined today by a guest speaker. Deborah Fisher from the Tennessee Coalition for Open Government has joined us today. Ms. Fisher had a class at MTSU right before this, so I appreciate her rushing to join us today. Wanted her to spend a few minutes just sort of telling us a little bit about what the group does, and maybe some ways that we could be helpful to the organization in making ourselves more transparent to Tennesseans.
Thank you, Tiffany. Yeah, I was in an editing class, and they're getting ready for their midterm. So it was a review day, and we were able to get out just a little early, but I hope they're ready for Thursday. So thanks for having me. And actually, that was just terrific. I love seeing the tail end of the portal, Melissa, that you guys have installed. I didn't know that. And it makes me very interested to share information about that portal to others. I know there are some cities, Memphis, Chattanooga, who have portals. I'm not sure if it's the same vendor, but they can be really good both for the custodian as well as for the requester, and frankly for people like us, open government advocates, because one of the issues that we have is a lot of what is out there is very anecdotal. And so the chance to have a portal that has data in it that can be analyzed in terms of what the trends are, allow us to think about, what are the best practices and policies around that. And, the same thing on fees, like, I don't know if like the guy that asked for 6,000 documents, if he actually had to pay a fee or did he get those free?
That is a continuing conversation.
Okay.
To be resolved.
Okay. Well, normally, if he requested copies, he would pay the labor and copy fees that are allowed by law. And in that case, some of the costs might be recouped and maybe could help fund this portal. But at any rate, but on the other hand, if you ever are able to accept fees through that too, it's also good to analyze, how much in fees you're getting and what proportion of costs it covers, et cetera, et cetera. So there are a lot of great avenues for this portal. And I've seen in terms of other cities, a few hiccups, and you may have covered this, but for example, Annie asked about the ID. And, some requesters, and I just shared this because you just talked about it, but some requesters wonder, can they make an account where they just have to upload their ID one time instead of every time they make a request? Like a frequent flyer, like let's say John. I don't know if he makes a lot of requests, but let's just say he might, maybe. So, there are things that can help. And also, it also helps in understanding how you prioritize requests, like, is it like triage, or are they sequential, or you do the short ones first? And, so there are all kinds of things that we've seen. And one of the things we've seen that has not really been satisfying or not made sense to requesters, not at UT, but at other places, has been where it's really sequential. So you get someone who's made a really large request, like the attorney for the 6,000 documents, and then nobody else's request is worked on until that one's done. And that doesn't seem fair really to anybody involved. But I'm sure that you guys don't do it that way, but I have seen that happen. where it's kind of you're in a queue, and they don't like separate the request and sort of deal with them on size and things like that. But I think that the statute certainly allows that. It certainly allows the entity itself to make some decisions about what is practicable in terms of when documents are returned. So anyway, I just wanted to, those were some last little thoughts, but I'm just so happy to see that. And UT, as I often say, and I have 2 kids there, so I should have worn orange, but I think can be an example in this area, and certainly with the portal. And as I've mentioned to Carrie, I don't see her on the phone, but or on the call, but MTAS and CTAS are so important to us in terms of providing good guidance and efficient and practices in terms of public records, and also actually open meetings and things like that. So Tennessee Coalition I'm Deborah Fisher, the Executive Director of Tennessee Coalition for Open Government. I've been doing this job since the November 2013, really 2014 was my first full year. Prior to that, I was a journalist for 25 years. I was 10 years at the Tennessean as the senior editor for news, and in that role, that was my last role I had there. And in that role, I supervised the news team, business teams, and copy desk, and the investigative team. And prior to that, I was the business editor there for 3 years, and that's a little bit more obvious. And before that, I worked in Texas at Corpus Christi Caller-Times, where I was the editor and vice president. And then I got my start in Tyler, Texas as a reporter, graduated from Baylor. So that's me in a nutshell. And have been, so in Nashville, for quite a while now. And so I took this job in 2014, and my predecessor, who Chairman Brooks might remember, was Frank Gibson, who had since moved over to the Tennessee Press Association. And so we do different things. One of the things we do in the spring is we do track legislation. And we try to identify any proposed legislation that would make a change to the public records law or the open meetings law. And we don't catch everything because, as you guys know, who deal with public records, exemptions in this are all over the statute. They're not just in 107-503, which is where, et cetera, which is where the public records law is. They can be in any title. And so it's not necessarily always obvious when there is an exemption being added, but we do try to track those. And if something, and try to understand why the exemptions are sought, what the lawmaker is trying to achieve with them, and if we think that there may be a reason to narrow that exemption, or more often, just make it more clear, on what is being exempted so that it's not vague. I think one of our issues with exemptions that we've noticed, and there has been, the Office of Open Records has done like a compiling of all the exemptions in the state. But one of our issues with some of the exemptions is that they are not specifically enough worded. So the intent, that might have been expressed, or the reason for closing a record might have been one thing, but perhaps the language allows for something else to be closed that was not intended or was not even really discussed when it happened. So, we're just trying to get clarity on that kind of thing and kind of go from there. So that's one of the things we do. And we prepare a legislative report and share that with members, but also have a version that goes up online on our website. Which is tcog.info, info. If you go to tcog.org, you will find the Church of God. So we're not that. But anyway, so TCOG was founded in 2003, so it's actually been around for a long time. Frank Gibson, my predecessor, was the founding executive director of it. and he was the longtime political editor at the Tennessean, but also very involved with Society of Professional Journalists. And in that role, he was often working on public records and open meetings issues throughout the state, and realized that we needed, a group that focused on what was going on, and to track not just legislation, but court rulings and court cases, so the status of the law would be understood, and so that the public would know how to use it. And so we modeled our organization off of the Virginia Coalition for Open Government, and that coalition is even though Frank was a journalist, and we have definitely media members on our board, the vision for the coalition was to be broad-based, not just a press association kind of arm, but rather broad-based with citizens. So we, in the very beginning, back in 2003, reached out and included board members from various organizations. The League of Women Voters is one. We've since added the Beacon Center of Tennessee has a representative on our board. They've been on our board for a while. We've had government officials on our board. We have we've had a past government official on our board. So as well as some citizen advocates in different places. So that helps us kind of keep our head screwed on, we think, straight, and at least representing a broad constituency. So I mentioned we do the legislative tracking. We do also tracking of court cases. Occasionally we will get involved in a court case as an amicus most often, or we might join a coalition. We actually just were involved in a case as one of the several plaintiffs related to an open meetings violation by the State Registry Board of Election Finance, which the chancellor just last week found in our favor that there was an open meetings violation. And when we get involved in a case, it's usually not like an open meetings case. It's usually not because we're trying to nullify an action that was taken by a board. And most of the times when someone files an open meetings lawsuit, it's because of that. But we are mostly concerned about the clarity of the law and making sure that, we all know the rules of what the law are. And if there are disagreements about that those go before a judge to be able to look at that. And so that's why we will become involved. But most of the time, I just track court cases. There was a court case in Knoxville that I actually traveled over several times to track recently, related to the Knox County Sheriff and access to records. Actually, it was a UT sociology professor who had actually requested these records and been going back and forth. And the chancellor in Knox County also found in favor of the records requester in this instance. But it was important because part of the law we felt like was clarified as well there too. So those are two tracking things I do, but much of my year after the legislature lets us all go is actually education. And so I do a lot of workshops and presentations. I do a lot of workshops for journalists. I have gone into WBIR, for example, and newsrooms across the state. I've also talked a lot to student journalists who are not really as familiar with FOIA and open meetings, and they don't always realize that every state has different laws on public records and open meetings. And so I do a lot of that sort of training on that. And I also do community presentations. So civic organizations will ask me to come talk about things. And interestingly, while there are a lot of citizens interested in public records access, citizens are really interested in open meetings. And you can imagine, because it's, they want to know what their school board, city council, et cetera, are doing. And they're very interested in having access to meetings and having access to agendas for upcoming meetings and having notice of upcoming meetings where they can actually see them. In a place like UT, you have a well-oiled machine in terms of at least it appears to me, maybe there's an issue, but from the outside, it appears that you have a pretty good process for your board meetings and such. So But there are some cases where, it's not so well oiled, and sometimes agendas aren't available or meetings don't get noticed right. So that I run a helpline, and I get help about 300 people a year who call in, journalists and citizens, and the mix is probably about 2/3 journalists, 1/3 citizen. And in relation to open meetings, by far the most questions I get from citizens are on open meetings. So we have a very strong open meetings law, but citizens sometimes find it hard to enforce, because really to enforce it you have to go to court. So it really is mostly about citizens informing their officials about what the law requires, and kind of advocating for change if the law is not being followed. So I do a lot of community presentations, and as I mentioned, I also do the helpline, which is basically my phone number, email, and I talk to a lot of reporters and citizens across the state, and unfortunately, it gives me, usually when I hear from people, I hear about the problems. So, you're probably on the other end, you see the problems from the custodian point of view, but I really get a dose of the problems from people calling the helpline, because they're not calling the helpline to say how great it was to get this public records request. They're calling because they're running into a problem. So I have a real database, actually. I keep a database on everybody that I talk to and issues that they bring up, so that we can analyze those and try to provide some kind of, some kind of prioritization of issues, or some kind of issues when we're talking to policymakers. So in addition to that, our website has various resources on them, and various resources on it. We have something called Keys to Open Government, which is kind of a very easy layman's guide to Tennessee's public records and open meetings laws. And that comes in booklet form, which I've given a lot out to students when I've gone to speak to journalism students. It was funded by a Tennessee Press Association grant. And we also have that online as a PDF, and so it's searchable in that respect as well. And I think that was published about 4 years ago, and so I've been going in and updating it, because every year, there are some tweaks to the laws regarding that. We also have a email newsletter, and if you're interested in signing up for it, please do. You can go to our website and do that. But I try to, put things out when there are things in the news more often than not. It's not one that I send out weekly, or I tell people I'm not going to jam up your email box on this, but I do try to put things out which are newsworthy. So those are some of the resources we provide. I'm also, we also try to be an advocate in the public about it. So I do talk to news media reporters sometimes when they, want an interview. So sometimes, having been a print person, that's been the most uncomfortable thing, having to talk to a TV person, but I have muddled through, and that's also part of my job. So I'm happy I was so interested in your presentation, Melissa. I wish I could have heard all of it, because I'm very interested in how to improve the process and for it to be more efficient for everyone involved, because from our perspective, if some of the efficiency is important, not just in terms of what the cost will be to the requester, but what the cost is to government. So, I mean, we know that is that we have to be part of the solution on that. So we're definitely interested in that. From the requester point of view, the biggest complaint I receive, and I would say that it has increased during COVID, maybe for obvious reasons, is delays. And so, but I think another problem that I often see, and Melissa may see this as well, is being able to know what to ask for. So sometimes reporters and citizens, they know the information they want, but they aren't exactly sure the document that would sort of answer the question, or the document that would have that information in there. And so it results in sometimes a vaguely worded, or maybe a too broadly worded request. And with some government entities, I try to emphasize this, that some government entities don't want to talk to the requester. It's just whatever you sent in, that's what we're going to do. And they may have reasons for that. But actually, communication is helpful, because it can, first of all, talking to someone always creates a different relationship. But also, sometimes you're talking to the requester and you realize that what they really want is not all the emails with this and this and this. They're really looking for this piece of information, and can you, hint or guide me a little bit. And while that on the front end takes a little bit of extra time, I'm a big believer in that actually reduces the amount of time that it takes. Now, you can't get inside someone's mind and write their story or answer their question. I know there's situations where that may not be practical, but in many, many situations, I think it is. And if a requester can actually, I advise, especially journalists, but also citizens, to try to get on the phone with somebody and say, okay, I know it looks like I'm requesting a lot, but it's because I just really want this, and can you help guide me to that? So that's one of the problems I see in the request process in Tennessee. And I think it's maybe because sometimes when people have bad experiences on either side, they tend to start, not wanting to talk to each other. And it's just important to understand that that's, in the end, probably not going to get us where we need to go. So that's one thing I try to talk to people about. Other than that, I know that Chairman Brooks was talking about, large requests. So I thought I would just mention one thing. We did actually try to assist a lawmaker who was interested last year, Senator Hale, in a bill that would address harassing requesters. And we worked hard with him and tried to look at other states and maybe what they did with that. And there was a bill, but it ended up just not hitting on all the points that the committee wanted to hit on to get out of there. So I'm not sure where that will go. And maybe it wouldn't get to probably what Chairman Brooks is talking about, just simply a large request. But we know that there are issues out there. And again, I just suggest really talking to the requester, especially with email requests. The other thing I just want to mention is that I do believe that the bigger answer to some of our transparency and access issues are the ways that records are kept and the way that they can be retrieved. Because we've just gone into an explosion of digitization, I guess, and being able to locate and retrieve records and segregate. You talked about the driver's license no longer being sent by email, but to be able to segregate that personally identifying information from the public part of the public record. I think since sometimes you'll see a report, and let's just like a police report or an application or something like this, and it has fields for all this information that would be confidential under the law, like your social security number or something like that. And it's all mixed in there with, say, a chunk of information that would be public. And so, I think that there has to be this may not happen at UT as much, but I definitely have seen it. And I think there needs to be, more thought on the front end on how records are kept so that information is easily segregated. In a database, it is easily segregated, but in certain forms, it's not. And this is something that the former Office of Open Records Counsel, Ann Butterworth, also talked about in terms of lowering the cost and making the system more efficient. And so those are things often at the legislature, at least, we don't, talk about that stuff as much. But those are the things that I think can improve the process and improve transparency. So anyway, I'm happy to answer questions, or if you have any comments or whatever. So
I have to bug out, but I wanted to say it's good to see you, Deb, and I appreciate all of you all. It's been a good meeting. I don't know when the next one is, but I hope we have another one soon.
We will. I'll actually, we're supposed to meet annually, but I'm thinking I might do this every 6 months. Annually just seems like a little too long, but I'll be sending out notes and the recording as soon as I get that transcribed, and we'll put it on the website for transparency. Thank you, John. I appreciate it. So, Ms. Fisher, are there any, is there any legislation out there that you're anticipating this coming session that you all will be actively pursuing or monitoring?
The thing that I think we want to pay attention to is the open meetings law, because right now with the pandemic, the legislature at the tail end had bills related to emergency meetings being held electronically. This actually does not affect UT because, as you probably know, you have the absolute broadest ability to have electronic meetings, but there's nothing in there really allowing local governing bodies. So what happened, there was disagreement, and I can talk about what that is if you'd like, but there was disagreement over, you know, what that would look like. And honestly, they just didn't have enough time. I mean, there were 3 days and they were doing a lot of things before they tried to get out of there. So there really wasn't enough time to hash out a brand new bill about electronic meetings. That was somewhat complicated. So what happened was the governor came in and did it by executive order, allowing governing bodies to meet electronically, and he's updated that order. And the most recent update to that went into effect October 1 is that, you know, I think incorporates some of the better practices that we see with electronic meetings, which are that they have to be live streamed, like either by video like this is, or conference call. But if you cannot see who's speaking, you know, if you can only hear that person, the person has to identify themselves essentially. So in other words, one of the complaints that we got during the interim right after the pandemic, you know, shut a lot of this down was that they would patch into a conference call, but they could not tell who was talking because you didn't really know their voice. Even members of the governing body, although they mostly knew each other's voices, had difficulty knowing who was talking. So there was quite a bit of confusion. Obviously, video is better because you can see them, and there's a little bit more assurance that, you know, your representative is on the video. You know that's them. You know it's not someone else casting a vote. You can see them. So there's, you know, I've been very much an advocate of, even on the video meetings that are taking place, that people not turn off their screens, that members of governing bodies not turn off their screens, but be present entirely the entire time, just like they would be in a meeting. And that is not in the executive order, but that is something that we're interested in because we hear that from constituents, and we think that that's fair. Now, you know, I know that sometimes people will leave a meeting and come back to a meeting, you know, take a recess, whatever. But I think that can be accommodated. But anyway, so we expect, you know, I don't know if that's going to be taken up. I've wondered about that. But if so, we are very interested because we have done some surveys of how people have viewed the electronic meetings, and we asked them to talk about different types of governing bodies. So county commissions, school boards, city councils, utility, you know, municipal utilities, that kind of thing. We are interested in, last year, Leader Lamberth had a bill that he wanted to do something that was proactive about putting something on websites, government entities putting something on websites. And when this kind of legislation has been advanced in the past, not by us, but some other lawmakers who had some interest in this, It was about putting like all the expenditures, you know, like the checkbook on the website so you can see like everything your school board spends or whatever. And there was a study that was done by, I'm sorry, I've lost it. But anyway, there was a study done by the group that does the studies for the state. And they came back with, you know, some recommendations. If governing bodies are required to put things on websites, what should they be? And they said, you know, really people don't look at a checkbook type stuff. I mean, that's not something, you know, that people were pouring through. And what you should put online are things that people that are more public facing, that people tend to want to see the most. And so like for a public meeting, one example was the agenda for the upcoming meeting. If you have a website, putting the agenda on the website with a notice for the meeting is an example of something that people want. And so anyway, there were a few other things that were sort of public facing that were suggested for websites if a governing entity had a website. And so anyway, when Leader Lambert, he asked our group, well, what do you think should be, if we required something to be on website that was kind of a pro-transparency move, what do you think it should be? And so I gave him this study, and there were more things in it, but I said, honestly, if there's one itch that you want to scratch for citizens across the state, it is getting them access to the agenda of upcoming meetings. Because I get a lot of complaints about that. So when we got into it, what we realized is that some governing bodies were concerned that if they put out an agenda and made it public, that would restrict them to only doing items on the agenda at their meeting. And they were afraid that there might be a situation where they needed to add something to the agenda. So the bill was tweaked that said that they could add something to the agenda during their meeting, and no problem, as long as they follow their own rules. So for example, if a county commission says you can add something to agenda with a majority vote, they may have their own process or rules or Robert's rules in doing that. So I don't know if that bill is going to be brought back. That was one of those that was in committee when they stopped, and it wasn't brought up in June. There was some thought about that, but it wasn't brought up in the June session. So it had gotten out of subcommittee. So, we would still like to see that. We would like to see that, even if it's not legislation, it's just policy. We would like to see governing bodies put agendas, make agendas available on their websites if they have a website. If they don't have a website, obviously they can't do that, but a lot of them do. And I think CTAS and MTAS even did some tutorials about, how to upload PDFs to a website, and, trying to, because you have various levels of technical expertise within different government entities across the state. So, trying to get more training on how to do that kind of thing.
Okay.
More than you wanted, Tiffany.
Yeah, that's great. That's good to know. Any other questions for Ms. Fisher?
Hey, Tiffany, I would just offer a comment. Deb, I know you came in halfway through the Just FOIA presentation. The next time you're in Knoxville, or if we're in the Nashville area, I would be more than happy to walk you through the system, or we could arrange something virtually. One, two, I would ask that if you have organizations that you have worked with that have really good online systems, I would love to take a look at that so we can sort of compare and understand how we can get better on our end.
Thank you, Melissa. I'll be in touch with you on that. Thank you so much.
This is Scott Gordy. I'm at the Institute for Public Service, and our two agencies, which you mentioned, were CTAS and MTAS, the Municipal Technical Advisory Service and the County Technical Assistance Service. So thank you for the shout out.
Yeah. We really appreciate their guidance. I go to them a lot. And one of the things that they actually put online that I tell public records requesters about is they have retention schedules on records. And the retention is interesting But for requesters that don't know what things are called, that don't know what documents are called or what is kept, and who make these broad requests, I always tell them, go to the retention schedule, because you'll see the records that a government entity has, and you'll be able to identify that. And you've done a little bit of homework, before. And so I do appreciate all the work they do. They do a great job.
Thank you.
Okay, anything else before we wrap up today? Okay, well, as I mentioned to John, I will send out minutes later this week along with the recording. I can actually send the recording to you all before it's transcribed. That usually takes us 2 to 3 days with my provider. And then I will upload approved. I'll give you all a few days to look at minutes and correct anything, and then I'll upload everything to the website. And we will meet again in 6 months. But if you have anything in the meantime, please let me know. Ms. Fisher, thank you so much for joining us today. It was great to hear about TCOG and everything you all are doing.
Thank you for having me. Thanks for the opportunity.
Okay, guys, have a great Tuesday. Thank you.